English by the Nature Method by Arthur M. Jensen. Brought to you by Ayan Academy.
Chapter 43 The Four Peoples of the British Isles. I noticed that one of the men to whom I was introduced today explained that he was a Scotchman, not an Englishman. Wasn't that rather a strange thing to say? Asked Storm. You may think so, but that is only because you're a stranger. People in foreign countries speak about this country as England and the people as English, and know nothing about the existence of other nations in the British Isles. But there are really four different countries: England, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland, with four different nations: the English, the Welsh, the Scotch, and the Irish. In Wales, Scotland, and Ireland, you will find the Celts, the people to whom all four countries used to belong before the Romans and, later on, the Saxons came to England. Storm. I remember our teacher telling us that the country belonged to the Celts until their enemies took it away from them. But I must say that I never knew that the Celts exist as a nation, or rather, as three nations. You had better never say that to a Celt, said Marshall, laughing, for he would not like to hear that anybody, even a stranger, did not know of the existence of the Celts. All Celts are rather proud that they are Celts. The Scotchman to whom you spoke today was proud that he was a Scotchman. That was the reason why he mentioned that he was a Scotchman and not an Englishman. I am afraid, said Storm, that I know but little about Scotland. I have read many funny stories about Scotchmen, but the stories that I know about them do not tell me anything about Scotland. The stories will not tell you anything about the Scotch either, Marshall replied, for most of those stories give the idea that the Scotch love money more than anything else in the world. You're told that they will do anything to get money and that they don't like spending it. This, however, is not so. The Scotchman takes care of his money. He is very careful with money, but that is all. I think there must be many other people who are careful with their money and who look twice at a penny before spending it. I myself do not waste money, spending it unnecessarily, and I am sure that you don't waste your money either. Storm. No, I am rather careful with my money. I should like to hear a little bit about these three nations. Will you tell me about them? I shall be only too pleased to do so, Marshall replied. To begin with Wales, it has had English kings for about 700 years. When the country was conquered by Edward I, who was then King of England, the Welsh told him that they would never accept a king who had not been born in their own country and did not speak their language. So Edward called the most important men of Wales to the castle of Carnarvon and told them that he would with pleasure give them a king who had been born in Wales and could not speak one word of English. They were very pleased with this and promised to accept such a king. Their surprise, however, was great when Edward's firstborn son, who had been born at the castle a few days before, and who was to be king after Edward, was brought into them. But they had to agree with the king that he had kept his promise, as the little prince really had been born in Wales and could not speak one word of English, and so they accepted him. Since that time, the eldest son of the English king has always been called the Prince of Wales, and the Welsh and the English have lived together in harmony. It has been much more difficult for the English and the Scotch to live in peace and harmony with each other, and the two countries have had the same kings for no more than 300 years. For many hundred years the two nations were enemies, and the Scotch had just as great a hatred of the English as the English of the Scotch. But the two countries have now become the best of friends, and the existence of the old hatred has been forgotten. As Queen Elizabeth of England had no children, the people in both countries agreed that it would be best for England and Scotland to be joined together under one king. James VI of Scotland became James I of England. Since that time, the two countries have been joined together and have had the same kings. Until then, the English and the Scotch had often fought each other. In the early wars, the Scotch would send soldiers to the nearest English towns, where they would do as much damage as possible. Sometimes the damage was very great. Houses were set on fire and quite destroyed, so that not one stone was left upon another. The Scotch only came to destroy houses and fields and to take the cows and sheep of the English. Having done that, they hurried back as quick as possible to Scotland to hide in the mountains, where it would be difficult to find them. They knew that the English would hurry after them, but very often they were so well hidden that the English had to give up trying to find them. I have told you about the Scotch coming into England, but the English were no better. They went just as often into Scotland and did the same damage to the Scotch. Sometimes the English even sent large armies into Scotland. Once, the English went into Scotland with an army of 150,000 men. The Scotch got together an army of good soldiers, but they were few in comparison with the English. The two armies met at Bannockburn, where a great battle was fought. The Scotch soldiers were very brave. They were not afraid of meeting and fighting against a much larger army. At the end of the day, the English either lay dead on the field of battle or were hurrying back to England as quickly as their legs would carry them. At one time, many European nations had Scotchmen in their armies because they were such brave soldiers. But now that England and Scotland have the same king, the Scotch soldiers fight side by side with the English in the British army. And now I had better tell you something about the Irish. Ireland is different from Wales and Scotland in many things, as a comparison between the Irish and the other two nations will soon show. While it has been rather easy for England, Wales, and Scotland to work together, there have been great difficulties in arriving at peace and harmony between the Irish and the English. One reason is that the Irish live in an island of their own, while the English, the Scotch, and the Welsh live together in another island. Then we must also remember that most of the Irish are Catholics, while most of the people of the other countries are Protestants. I don't think that we English understand the Irish very well, and we have not always been particularly kind to them. All this has meant that some of the Irish, particularly those in the southern parts, which is called Éire, have not been very satisfied with the English. You will understand, however, that it is almost impossible to satisfy people unless you understand them. Scotland and Wales send representatives to the British Parliament in London, but since 1922, Éire has had a parliament of her own, and she no longer sends representatives to London. Northern Ireland has a parliament of its own, but at the same time sends representatives to London. When we speak about all four countries together, we usually call them either the British Isles or Great Britain and Éire, Ireland. There you have a few facts about the Welsh, the Scotch, and the Irish. Are you satisfied with that? If not, I promise to tell you more some other time. How to write a letter in English. At the top of the paper, in the right-hand corner, write the address, the day of the month, and the year. For example, 68 Victory Road, Ealing, August 4th, 19. You may write either August 4th or 4th August, but you usually pronounce the 4th of August. On the left-hand side of the paper, a little farther down, the words Dear Storm, followed by a comma, begin the letter itself. This is the usual way of beginning a letter in English. If you write to a person whom you do not know very well, you first write the person's name and address, and under that the words Dear Sir or Dear Madam, for example. Mr. George Bentham, 47 Nelson Road, Wimbledon. Dear Sir, notice that the number of the house comes before the name of the street. If you wish to send greetings to somebody else, too, for instance to a person called John, you can do so with the words, Please remember me to John. At the end of the letter, it is most common to write, Yours sincerely, followed by your name. If you write to a person whom you do not know well, you may write, Yours faithfully, or Yours truly, and then your name. Now you know enough about writing letters in English to write a letter from Wood to Storm. Exercise C. Grammar. If we want to express that something belongs to somebody, we may add an S to the name of the person to whom it belongs. For example, the boy's pencil. When this S is added to a noun, we say that the noun is in the genitive. We notice that there is an apostrophe, which looks like this. It is put either before or after the S, to make it different from the plural S. In the singular, the apostrophe is always put before the S. For example, the boy's pencil, the baby's doll, the child's ball. In the plural, there are two ways of making the genitive. Nouns that already have a plural, S, do not add an extra S in the genitive, but only add the apostrophe. Examples: the boy's pencils, the baby's dolls. So we see there is a difference between the singular and the plural in writing. The boy's pencils, the boy's pencils. But to the ear, there is no difference. Nouns, however, that do not end in S in the plural have the apostrophe and the S, just like the genitive in the singular. Examples: the men's hats, the children's balls. The genitive S is pronounced in the same way as the plural S. The dog's nose, the horse's head. The S genitive is used to express that something belongs to a person or an animal, but we may express the idea of the genitive in another way too. John's father, or the father of John. If it is not a person or an animal that something belongs to, we use the word of to express the genitive. The roof of the house was high. The leaves of the trees had fallen. Perhaps you have noticed that we speak, for example, of 2 weeks' holiday or of a day's work. When we speak of a measure of time, the S genitive is used. There is also another way in which the S genitive is used. People speak of shopping at Selfridges. It looks as if a word should have followed Selfridges, and really the word shop should have followed. But people are so used to hearing the name that everybody knows what is meant. In the same way we speak of having dinner at your uncle's, that is, at your uncle's house, or of dining at your brother's, etc.